Hello Internet, my name is Ben Veach and welcome to Shuad Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at Suicide Squad, written and directed by David Ayer and based on the long-run DC Comics team with the same name. Just so everyone knows where I'm coming from, all cards on the table, I am a huge DC Comics fan. Characters like Batman, Superman, and the mythos surrounding them were hugely instrumental into my childhood, and continue to be a huge part of my daily life. I swear, a good 30% of what I think and talk about these days is DC Comics characters, so I am an enormous DC fan, and these characters couldn't mean more to me. That being said, I wasn't the biggest fan of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. My biggest problem is both of them seem to fundamentally misunderstand the characters that they were representing, though I will admit that Man of Steel was well made and Batman v Superman had its moments. But today we're talking about Suicide Squad, which is advertised as the fun action comedy cousin of the bleak and cynical previous DC films. I will say, the production design in this film is inspired. The sets, costumes, and effects all look bright, colorful, and comic booky, while still keeping a touch of grounded realism. The movie is also well cast, and actors are definitely trying with what they have. And this movie has a huge leg up on the previous DC films, in that the people making it do seem to understand what makes the characters so likable and endearing. Will Smith was definitely one of the high points as Deadshot, playing him as charismatic while still being a believable killer. Jared Leto's Joker was also really enjoyable for me, as it was distinctly different from the previous in-screen incarnations, but I can't deny that it was one of the more interesting performances of the film. Jai Courtney is actually great as Captain Boomerang, one of the funniest performances there. Killer Croc doesn't get a ton of lines, but the makeup does look really impressive. El Diablo is probably the best developed character of the bunch, and Jay Hernandez does a great job with what he's given. Enchantress is definitely visually interesting, and Katana's sure there. And as for Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, well, the phrase trying too hard comes to mind. Like, everything she does and says is in character with Harley Quinn, but something about it makes it feel unnatural, and like the movie really wants us to think that she's the fun, exciting character without actually earning it. Now, I don't think this is the actress's fault, because she's definitely doing a good job with what she's given. Something about how the character's portrayed, though, just never quite clicked with me. Okay, that being said, the film is a sloppy, awkwardly put-together mess of a movie. The narrative is shockingly weak and even occasionally hard to follow. All of Act 1 breaks the golden rule of cinema, show don't tell, having many people tell us that these characters are supposed to be badasses, without really showing them in action all that much, or giving us any insight into their character or emotional state. There's also multiple scenes of exposition, giving us the same information over and over and over, never adding anything new to the story. For instance, there's a flashback early on that shows Deadshot as a fantastic shot, but then not but 20 minutes later in the film, there's a firing range scene showing that Deadshot is a terrific shot, both establishing the same thing, the second one being completely unnecessary. When the plot does get moving, it's kind of a mess. The story overall makes no sense, the characters are poorly defined, if at all, the villain is weak, and the central conflict doesn't even become apparent until Act 3. I was often left there wondering what the squad was exactly trying to accomplish scene to scene, which is a real shame because in the comics they are a highly directive-driven task force. In this film, the narrative is sloppily centered around just stopping a glowing blue light in the center of the city, and that's the entire second 2 acts of the film. In most regards, the film is technically lacking, with basic film school 101 principles like the 180-degree rule broke in multiple times of frustrating directorial ineptitude. There's also multiple instances where the editing is just flat out confusing, cutting around randomly and struggling to establish even a basic pace or spatial relation within its scenes. Out of all the elements of the film, I'd say the writing, directing, and editing are definitely the weakest links. This is also a case Much like in last year's Fantastic Four, that the director made one film and the studio wanted an incredibly different one. The problem is, the original film seems dull and boring, and the new, light and funny additions seem forced and insincere. Neither works, so the film lacks a central identity that should give it the confidence to be the fun, dumb summer blockbuster it at least could have been. And that means this film commits the greatest sin of all. It's boring. Like, I could barely make it through the movie boring. And the film trudges along on such a studio-manufactured autopilot that nothing in it feels like it has any actual weight. Jokes that should have been funny and character moments that should have been impactful just all fall flat because everything in the movie seems so incredibly insincere. And that's not to say that this might be the case for everybody. I'm sure there's people out there who the humor and the characters will work for, but for me, I just couldn't get over how hollow and forced everything in the film felt. Nothing feels genuine enough to even be the dumb fun that it could have been. It all just feels like a soulless attempt to recreate the quirky but earnest tone that made Guardians of the Galaxy so fantastic. In the end, Warner Bros. Got a product that looked more like last year's Fantastic Four. And that's a real shame. Overall, Suicide Squad is a major letdown for Warner Bros., and maybe a third strike for DC Entertainment. I honestly wonder what it's like in the Warner Bros. Offices right now, as the third film in their much-anticipated DCEU has been critically panned. I'd imagine there's an amount of panic that, even with a new creative team, they can't seem to make a good film off of some of the most popular and enduring pop cultural icons of the last century. Wonder Woman and Justice League are already so far into production that they absolutely have to be released next year. But after that, one has to wonder if Warner Bros. Is going to be reshuffling its plans for its extended DC universe. I suppose I'll just close out this review by saying, hey, as a young up-and-coming director with dreams of bringing his favorite DC characters to the large and small screens, this could be good news for me. While Suicide Squad is definitely a marked improvement from Batman v Superman, it does feel a little bit like a 2 steps forward, 1 steps back situation. The love of the source material from the creators is very evident, to the point of having very comic book accurate backstories, but this film doesn't fail as an adaptation, it just fails as a film. And who knows? This could very well spell out the beginning of the end for the much anticipated DCEU. And maybe even the start of my glorious reboot of the franchise. Call me